All right. So let's have a let me prep you for what's about to happen. Um, in the real world, in athletic sports kinesiology, you have good players. Like Michael Jordan was a great player, but Michael Jordan wasn't necessarily a great general manager. Uh, Nobody wanted to tell Michael Jordan his idea was a bad idea. It happens. So my point is that it's rare that great players can become great coaches. Not that it can't happen, but it makes sense because a lot of these great players and whatever, they can do things that they can't teach other people how to do because just genetically they were gifted with being able to run, jump. They could compensate by not having to be savvy because they were just so. Can you imagine Simone Biles trying to teach someone how to be Simone Biles? You can't. She's the one-on-one. Right? So my point is that we need to separate the player from the coach. I am not teaching you guys to be players. In other words, never am I here saying, this is how you should hit a baseball. This is how you should kick a football. This is how you should. Y'all, you guys are players in your own sports, in your own areas. This class isn't meant to teach you how to lift or how to be you. This is a class to teach you how to be a good coach in the areas of your interest. Therapy, personal training, athletic training. Because perspective, you can be a great player. You can lift and be one of the best lifters in the world, but can you teach and understand other people's perspective to make them better? You see the difference? And that goes into this first point, the Dunning-Kruger effect. You've heard me say things like, guys, from my experience in kinesiology, we've been in fitness, we've been around fitness, we've been around sport, and so we have an elevated view of our knowledge with this stuff. It's not just you, it's me too, when I was here. And what happens is that we don't know what we don't know. And the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know near as much as I even thought I knew a year ago. That's just how life works. The people that I see right here, y'all are my regulars. I'm not speaking to you guys. I'm speaking to the people that are going to watch this video 2 days before the exam. I keep track of views, right? So it's like my videos, I mean, we might have, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 students in here. There's 80 students in class. And my videos, my class videos have like 5 views or 6 views. And then all of a sudden, 2 days before the test, everybody's starting to view it, right? And the 5, 6 views, that doesn't even count like my mom. I did. Check it. So my point is, I think, again, I'm just trying to give advice to help you get the grade that you want to get. Me included, we have an overinflated idea of what we know because we know some, we've been around it for a while. But we don't know as much as we think we know, me included. Okay? So we need to just keep that in mind as I'm trying to teach you things and as we're going over things. Don't, oh, well, I've heard, maybe an analogy, Lindsay could back me up on this, like, oh, I know all about contractions. I had that in a freshman level class. You may know how to define them, but do you know how to apply them? That's the game. That's the game, okay? So let's keep an open mind. There are over 600 muscles in the body. And we're going to learn most of them in biomechanics, but we gotta walk before we can run. Most of us know kind of these catch-all terms like working the chest, the back, the tries, the bis, the core, the glutes, the hams, kind of generic things. And because we have so many muscles, and again, as a player, it may not matter. You're going, you're exercising, you're doing your things. But as a coach, as a future professional, we need to know what specific muscles do. We need to know how specific muscles work. We need to know how to set up variables where you're targeting specific muscles, recruiting specific muscles, stretching specific muscles. How many of you have ever seen the movie Coco? Remember that movie Coco? What I love about Coco is the analogy of we died two deaths, literal, and then when the last person remembers who you are on earth, you die a second death. In other words, you're gone from existence. So if all we ever do is say bicep, all of the other muscles that also help during those curl exercises get lost to existence. So they never get talked about. They never get brought up. If every single one of your problems is a nail, you better hope that your tool is a hammer. So think about some of the cliche terms we use: bicep, tricep, quads, glutes, calf, core is my favorite. Now, again, we have to be above core. We have to know what specific muscles are working for specific exercise. We need to know that. But it makes sense why this stuff can be tough, because our whole lives it's just been very fast and loose with verbiage, okay? So that's where I'm going to come in. I'm going to teach you process. I'm going to teach you techniques to use that are applicable every single time, because it's physics. And I know physics can be terrifying, but not when it's applied to our bread and butter. And that's movement, human movement. Okay? Newton's been around for a long time. So I have this first slide. So those of you that are watching video, I have it on the unit 3. So we have this picture, right? And look at all these different muscles: biceps, brachialis, brachioradialis. We have flexor, digit, superficialis, profonda. We have all kinds of muscles. If you were taking like a certification test, right, to be a personal trainer, first of all, there's a lot of them, right? Like like if you're going to be a lawyer, you got to pass the bar. Like there's one test for it. But in personal training, there's not an allied health profession. So I mean, there's several. So let's say you're studying for that test, and someone says, "What does the bicep do?" Again, I'm not judging. This is a therapy session for us. But if someone says, "What does the bicep do?" what would probably be the most logical answer to that question? Let's ask Google. Let's see. All right, Google. What does it do? Biceps brachii muscle, a two-headed muscle in the front of the upper arm. Primary functions to flex the elbow and supinate the forearm. Thanks, G. My G is now Brock. So let's think about that for a second. To flex the elbow, the biceps brachii flexes the elbow. I could see that, right? If we were doing here. Well, what if I was doing something like this? Wouldn't that be flexing my elbow? Would that be working my bicep? Gee, what's up with that? What if I was just holding the position for a picture and I didn't have any joint motion? You know that you're working your bicep, but there's no flexion. Gee, what's up with that? There's more to the story, right? So one of the problems that we have, me included, is that we have had an oversimplification of this stuff that is only true 1/3 of the time. What I mean by that is when you're doing curls, absolutely, the bicep is going to be working when I'm flexing my elbow. But the bicep's also going to be working when I'm extending my elbow. You know it, you feel it. And the bicep's also going to be working when I'm just isometrically holding this position. So it's not just about what does the biceps do. Your textbooks or traditional textbooks, online services, they're going to take the easy way out because it's easy. But there's nuance with this stuff. There's context to this stuff. The bicep only flexes the elbow when it has a specific type of contraction, a specific type of work. But the bicep can also be responsible for extending the elbow when it has a specific type of work. And the bicep can also be working by preventing elbow motion when it has a specific type of work. So what you notice on your first slide, this is probably the most important lecture that I give every semester, so I get a little work done. I get a little nervous about it. That's how important it is. So your first slide, muscles influence motion through contraction. Unfortunately, it's through the contraction that has been lost to nuance. All you guys have seen, heard, I call it the bro science. A muscle and a motion. Bicep flexes the elbow. Hamstring flexes the knee. Gastroc plantar flexes the ankle. Sartorius flexes the hip and flexes the knee. But not every time. Muscles influence motion through the context of contractions. And what are contractions? Contractions are just the ways muscles can work. You're going to hear me use contraction and work interchangeably, and I'll explain why I do that. Lindsay, what do muscles do? What can they only do? Pull. Absolutely. Muscles can only pull. And when you are looking at mechanical work, you guys remember in physics, you have like positive work, negative work. Remember that kind of stuff? Well, when a muscle pulls, let's say just like you and your friends, you're at a fundraiser and they have a tug of war kind of thing. And you get some friends and you pull on the rope because you sure as heck can't push on it. When you pull on that rope, you're trying to win the tug of war, if that's the game. But there's 3 possible outcomes. You can win while trying to win. And if you think about it, if you win, that means the flag in the middle is getting closer to you. You can tie while trying to win. In other words, you're trying to bring that flag closer to you, but the flag doesn't get further, it doesn't get closer, it stays the same distance, but you're still trying to influence that flag. And then the last one, this is the weird one. you can lose while you're still trying to win. You're still trying to shorten that distance. You're still trying to bring that flag to you, but all of a sudden that flag starts moving away from you. The distance gets longer, even though you're still trying to make the distance get short. That's weird. In fact, it's so weird. That's why eccentrics gets the name eccentrics. Because if you think of something eccentric, like, I don't know, your anatomical kinesiology professor, it's just weird. It's like it's just awful. It's eccentric. It's not what you're anticipating. That's how eccentrics gets its name. Why is an elevator called an elevator? Play along with it. Why is an elevator called an elevator? Brings you up, right? Does it bring you down? Campbell's making a pitch. We should change the name of the elevator. No, what we have to do is realize that the elevator brings you up, just like you said. But when you get to your floor, the elevator's still doing a job. It's still working. It's preventing you from falling down while you get off, right? It's still working, because if it wouldn't. And the elevator is still working while it lowers you down. But in all three scenarios, making you go up, keeping you in the same position, and letting you go down, the elevator is pulling up. There's no cable that yanks you down. That would be a bad elevator. So we could fashion it like this. An elevator is called an elevator not necessarily just because it brings you up, but it always pulls you up. Because again, when you get to the 10th floor, that cable still has tension on it. That cable is still pulling with the weight of you in the elevator. It's still doing a job. It's making you go up by pulling up. It's keeping you from falling down while pulling up. And it's letting you go down while still pulling up. True? It's the direction of pull. The elevator is called an elevator because it always pulls in the direction of elevation. Even though the motion can be different. So if you say, well, Campbell, if the elevator cable is constantly pulling up, how in the world can it be responsible for two different directions of motion? Two different types of contraction. That's what I'm trying to teach you guys over the next few days. So if we go to the tug of war analogy, the elevator pulling up and making you go up, doing what it's trying to do, bringing the tug of war flag closer to you while trying to do it, that would be like concentric contraction. Shortening while trying to shorten. Making motion happen in the direction of your pull. Concentric gets its name from a concentric circle. In other words, you start at one point, you go around, and you finish at another point. Our joint motions are somewhat angular, right? And in essence, when you have concentric contraction, you're trying to bring one point closer to the other. It's kind of how it got its name. The easiest one, I wish they could all be named this easy, is isometric. Same length, right? still working with the same length. So you have the elevator analogy. It's still doing a job. It's still pulling in the direction of elevation, but it's preventing any motion from happening so that you can get off and you can get on. Right now, the muscles in your neck, your cervical extension pullers are working isometrically to keep your head up. How do I know that? Because we can do a thought experiment. You could turn off all the muscles in your neck and this would happen. In fact, I see it sometimes. It's isometric. Gravity is trying to bring your elevator this way, so you need to pull with muscles at a constant tension in the other direction to keep your elevator from falling in. It's a type of work. Now, some of you physics geeks, I love that term. It's a term of honor and endearment for me. You may say, well, wait, Campbell, I thought work had to have motion, mechanical work. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. But this isn't about mechanical work. This is about physiological work. Remember in exercise physics class, y'all learned about all the magical Harry Potter-like stuff that's happening in the muscles with ATP and ryanodine receptors. That's some Harry Potter stuff. I'm a basic mechanics guy. But there's motion happening in the muscle itself with all these processes and enzymes. There's a factory, there's a full factory happening inside that muscle. There's a lot of motion. The sarcomeres are constantly moving, right? So we're not talking about mechanical work per se. We're talking about effort. We're talking about the muscle doing a job. That's work. When you go to your job, you go to work to do a job. That's what muscles do. When muscles have a job to do, they work. And sometimes they work concentrically, and sometimes they work isometrically, sometimes they work eccentrically. I'm going to teach you the process of being able to identify who's working and how they're working. And this is going to be, you ever take a class? I'm hoping the answer is yes, maybe not. You take a class, and then 2 days later, you're like, I don't remember a darn thing. I don't even know what I did. I'm hoping this is not that scenario. I always say, I want you to get your money's worth. It might take a little work, but once you have it, once that light bulb goes off, you will have a lot more than just a hammer in your toolkit. And it's going to be applicable for the rest of your life. They say, like riding a bike, you never forget. You will never forget once you learn how muscles influence motion through contractions. We've spent the first 2 units of class on this. It's very important. Biomechanics, we're going to get into specific muscles. But we don't have to have specific, well, in fact, specific muscles gets in the way of us learning how muscles work. I'm going to give you an analogy. Anybody know about my last intern student, Sarah Stamey? Sarah? Sarah caught on pretty quick to this. And she said one of the reasons she thinks she did is because she had no prior, she switched over to KNES. So in other words, she had no bad habits. Where are my any baseball fans out there? All right. There was a movie made about 20 years ago about the Yankees, Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, the chase for the Babe Ruth's home run record. And one of the actors swung, I think it was Barry Pepper, but he swung, now I'm a right-hander, but he swung just like Roger Maris. And they were like, how do I, because as you know, like whether you basketball, baseball, football, you think you're replicating someone's shot, but really you're shooting like yourself. Like it's so hard to replicate someone else's movement patterns, right? Because you're not them, they're not you, and you develop your own movement strategies. They were like, how in the world were you able to mimic the same swing as Roger Maris? It's amazing. You know what his answer was? I never played baseball. He was able to mold the first time he did it into what he needed. So although our temptation is to start spouting off at semimembranosus, semitendinosus, biceps femoris, rectus femoris, tibialis anterior, gastrocnemius. No. We have to go back to basics and understand, why are they even working? Why are they even being recruited? What jobs are they doing? Your barn's on fire. Who are you going to call? The fire department. Your cat's stuck in a tree. Who are you going to call? There's a leak in the pipes. Who are you going to call? It's the same with our bodies. We recruit. We call specific muscle groups because there is a need. So I'm going to teach you that. I'm going to teach you to ask or to see, who do we need, because you understand why we need them. That's why muscles are. Your extensors in the back of your neck are pulling the base of your skull down because you need them to do so, because gravity is trying to flex your neck. You're going to look at it like that. I'm going to teach you a process to see who you need muscle-wise, because we ask ourselves why we need it. And the ironic part about all this is your body already knows all this information. Knows it all. Lindsay, BMRC. How many of you work in a clinic? Or have you ever heard of manual muscle tests, right? Well, what I want you to do is think, well, how do I know which muscles I want to recruit? Well, depends on how I'm going to make them resist, right? I'm going to produce manual resistance to recruit specific muscles that I want. And Lindsay her body knows all of this stuff. We just need to unlock your brain being able to communicate what your body already knows. So in other words, arms out. If I want Lindsay to recruit a certain specific group of muscles, because no skeletal muscle ever works by itself. They're all in a team. That's why I use the tug of war example. Even Michael Jordan had teammates. Okay? Don't let me push your hands down. She knows right away she needs to use muscles that are pulling up if she's going to resist. If gravity's trying to take the elevator down, she needs to pull with some elevators, right? However, our bodies aren't like elevators. Sometimes we may have some trying to push us up. And so you need to pull with muscles down. Sometimes we may say, don't let me pull your hands out. So you need muscles that are trying to pull in. Don't let me push your hands in. You need muscles that are pulling out. It's common sense. Her body recruits. What's my speed? Her body recruits specific muscles because of a need, right? So the first thing we need to wipe out, Men in Black style, look at the light, and we need to erase some of our perception. I think I used that word. We have to look at muscles not as individuals. Again, Michael Jordan, greatest basketball player of all time. He still was on a team. Drew Brees was on a team. Patrick Mahomes on a team. Can we have all-star muscles? Absolutely. But they are still part of a team. And so what we need to do is we need to say, hey, bicep, I know you are a superstar. But if all I ever do is say, Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes, the Coco effect happens, and you forget all the other players who also contributed to that winning team. Does that make sense? So if all we do is say bicep, 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 we lose fact that, oh, there's a brachialis muscle that's playing tug of war with it. There's a brachioradialis muscle. There's a pronator teres. There's other muscles. There's other players on that team. If all we do is say tricep, 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 and forget about the aconians. If all we do is say hamstrings, hamstrings, hamstrings. Semimembranosus, tendinosus, biceps femoris, popliteus, gastrocnemius, sartorius, gracilis. We need to know these things. because you may have someone who has a strained sartorius muscle. And if all we ever do is remember the all-stars, we may have to do therapy on a backup. We have to know these things. So what we're going to do is I call it the elevator concept. I'll lie, I just made that up, but it sounds good. We are going to give team names to all of these muscle groups. And the easiest thing about it, the elevator concept. The names aren't going to be the Bulls, the Bears, the Saints, the Commanders. No. The team name is actually going to be simple. It's going to be in their direction of pull. An elevator pulls up, even when it's letting you down. We have as many team names, we have as many groups as we have joint motions. That shouldn't be scary, that should be encouraging. Oh, so we have ankle plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. Doesn't it make sense? We need some elevator cables that pull in the direction of dorsiflexion, and we need cables that pull in the direction of plantar flexion. We're going to call those dorsiflexors, plural, and plantar flexors, plural. However, I spent the first 20 minutes saying that doesn't mean those muscles will always cause dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. That just means they will always pull that way. It's a big difference. Dorsiflexion pullers always pull in the direction of dorsiflexion, even when they're allowing plantar flexion. Through eccentric contraction. We're going to get into this. Next week, I'm going to really delve in deep on how to solve for contraction. Guys, the days of playing fast and loose with contraction, it's tough. Is that concentric? Is that you have all these different variables, muscles, and motion and contraction? I'm going to teach you a process where we're going to solve for this. So I have like A and B, A plus B is equal to C. A is 3 plus 3. You know how to solve that. That's 6. If A is 6, and B, that's just joint motion. We spent 2 months figuring out joint motion. You know joint motion. So if you know A and you know B, then you know what C has to be. That's how I'm going to teach you to see contraction, because it's physics. It's an is. It's for another lecture. But think about it, guys. No longer you have to stress about with the tibialis. I need dorsiflexors. I need to call them to do a job. I need plantar flexors. I need knee extensors. I'm going to teach you all this stuff. But how liberating that you have an answer for it. And then if you have to know who are the players on the team, then you go to Google and look it up if you have to. It's more important that I teach you to see who's working because of why you need it to work to influence motion than it is to memorize 4 or 5 muscles and use them interchangeably. Glutes and the quads and the hips and the core. So we have as many teams of muscles, as many groups as we have joint motions. That should be super liberating. Our wrist flexes and extends. We need flexion pullers and extension pullers. We're going to call them flexors and extensors. Plural. Muscles that pull in the direction of flexion. Does that mean my wrist flexors will always do flexion? No. How vain. I could have flexion because of the extensors. I can have my flexors working if I have a dumbbell in my hand like this. They're working isometrical. I don't have any motion. And I could have flexion because of the flexor. But that's like saying, when Google and textbooks say stuff like bicep flexes the elbow, that's like saying Michael Jordan wins every game. Think about that for a second, because that's what you're saying. You don't win them all. What can the ankle do? Plantar and dorsi. We need strings that pull in each direction of motion. Plantar flexors and dorsiflexors we're going to call. Who are those muscles? I'll teach you today in biomechanics, and I'm going to teach you how to visually see them, how they cross the joint. But for now, again, how liberating. What can our shoulders do? Flex and extend in the sagittal. I need flexion pullers and I need extension pullers. But what I don't need is flexors when I flex and extensors when I extend. Does that make sense? I'll say it again. If you had dumbbells and you were doing front raises, aren't you working the same muscles when you bring it up and you let it down? You're working the same muscles, right? On the test, I'm telling you, I'm playing poker with my cards out. On the test, I'm going to say, all right, guys, what muscles were responsible for the shoulder extension? And people are going to tell me, oh, your extensors. And I'm like, that's fascinating. You would sling the weights down if you used extension pullers. Make sense? I'm just introducing you to what's coming. I'm going to teach you how this works. If I do a manual muscle test on my neck or someone else's neck, and I want to test muscles that pull to the right lateral cervical bending, I have muscles that pull that way. You don't need to know who they are. Right sternocleidomastoid, right erector spinae, spinalis iliocastalis, longissimus. Chlorophyll sounds more like chlorophyll. All you need to know is that I have muscles that pull this way, and I have muscles that pull that way. And if I want to test the muscles that pull this way, I need a force that's trying to make me go this way. So I have right lateral benders, I have left lateral benders, I have cervical flexion pullers, I have cervical extension pullers, I have right transverse cervical rotation pullers, and left transverse cervical rotation pullers. All the time we spend on all these motions, all you got to do is just say, well, I have multiple muscles that pull in all of those directions. I'm going to have inverters and everters and knee extensors and knee flexors and hip flexors and hip external rotators. Who are those muscles? Who cares? Doesn't matter right now. Because we have to learn what's the purpose of memorizing 600 names of players when you don't even know what teams they're on. So the first step before we get into the individual players, we gotta break it down into why do we have skeletal muscles? To influence our motion. Muscles influence motion. But the part that we're going to delve into in this class is how. And that's the contractions, the work. I'll give you another example. I'm telling you it's coming. I'm telling you it's coming. You have had muscles in motion, specific muscles with specific motion without the context of the contraction in your brain so much that on the test, I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to ask this question. Hi, Mom. Start, finish. And you're like, okay, knee flexion, right? And someone's going to tell me that your hamstrings did that. It's going to happen. Someone's going to tell me that your knee flexors, the muscles that are trying to flex your knee, did that. Does it make sense that if I already have grounding gravity trying to flex me, and I'll pull my legs, I'd literally pull my feet off the ground. But they're so brainwashed into saying, oh, the motion was flexion, so it must be flexion. On the test, I'm going to ask something like this. Let's pretend, the MVP of class. Let's pretend it's something reasonable. Let's say Ken is a 100-pound dumbbell. Guys, on the test, it's going to happen. Start, finish, and someone's going to tell me indirectly that a bicep somehow did that. You see the problem? Because all they're going to do is say flexion. Oh, Google said bicep does flexion. But you know that's not true. Your body knows that's not true. So why do we keep saying things like that? We have to have 3 variables to have these conversations. Muscles, motion, which is where most textbooks and Google leave it off. But we complete the equation. We balance the equation. We make it make sense all the time by putting the context of contraction. Muscles do influence motion through contractions, through the type of work. I'll finish off with this. Contractions are horrible word. Me don't like it. Dan Campbell, why don't you rule the world and then you can change it? Look, I'm not saying I can change it, but I can justify why I don't like it. Contraction infers something shortening, right? Like if a business is going to contract. But what it means, what it really means, it's trying to shorten. And I know that sounds like a silly, nuanced word coming from a dyslexic. But there's a big difference between shortening and trying to shorten. The rubber band is not trying to shorten. I stretch it, now it's trying to shorten. How do I know? Because if I let go, it's going to shorten. The rubber band can shorten while trying to shorten. That's going to be concentric, completing the points, bringing the points together. The rubber band can stay the same length while trying to shorten. How do I know? I let go and then this is the weird, guys. This is why I don't like the term contraction. This is why it's eccentric. The rubber band can be lengthened while it's still trying to shorten. Literally being pulled apart while it's trying to pull itself together. That's going to be our biggest therapy session. Okay? How many of you work with kids? How many of you have younger siblings? Okay. Going back to the tug of war analogy, if I'm playing tug of war with my sons and I'm trying to impress my wife, I'm probably not going to just yank them across the floor if you like it. No, what? So what you going to do? You're going to be a good uncle. You're going to be a good father. You're going to be a good wife. You're going to be a good aunt. You're going to be a good sibling. And you'll do this with the kids. Ready, set, go. You're going to go sub-max, right? Because that's what we do in the weight room. When you go into a machine, you do sub-max because you do multiple reps. So here's the trick. They're pulling with all their might. It's a constant. When you go into the weight room and you get on a machine and you set the stack, that's a constant. Constant 50, constant 60, constant 20. That's consistent. Because I can vary my pull, I am going to influence the motion in 2 different directions. while still pulling in the same direction. I can make the boys come to me, concentric, shortening while trying to shorten. I can keep the flag in the middle. Oh. Isometric, but I'm still trying to shorten. I'm just not doing it maximally. And then here's the hard one. Here's the one that we're going to work through. Different analogies, different examples. Oh, yeah, man. Still pulling to me, but I'm letting off just a little bit to let them win. You see, muscles can only pull. That means they can shorten themselves. But you know what muscles cannot do? Muscles cannot lengthen themselves. Muscles can shorten themselves, but muscles cannot lengthen themselves. Something must lengthen it. It could be another muscle. So think about it. Just like a punch. Bicep, tricep, bicep, tricep. Bicep can make my elbow flex, right? But the bicep can't push my elbow into extension. The tricep can make my elbow extend, but the tricep can't push my elbow into flexion. Muscles can only pull. And one of the side effects of that is they cannot lengthen themselves. The easiest practical example is a rubber band. A rubber band is sitting on the floor, on the table. It can't lengthen itself. It has to be lengthened. And then once it's lengthened, then it can shorten itself. That's how your muscles work. This was just a first day introduction. I wanted to overwhelm you a little bit. I promise you, we're going to work it out step by step, process by process, rinse, wash, repeat. Have a safe weekend.